Hello, it really jars me how much noise is outside at this moment. It's so late and there's still people driving around, and when an ambulance goes by or something, or a car goes by, it's so noisy. Anyway, this is One Black British Woman's Voice, and today I'm going to look at, and I've forgotten what I was going to look at because of all this noise outside. I was going to look at the phrase, get over it. Now, if, like me, you've been on this planet for a while, you've probably had someone come across you at some point in your life and advise you to get over something. And whilst I believe that that phraseology is probably pertinent in terms of certain things, such as maybe a relationship which has died and long since died, you need to move on as opposed to get over it. I find that largely that expression is not probable or pertinent for many other situations outside of that. And let me tell you why. If you look at the psychopathy of holding a grudge, not being able to get over something, one of its facilities rather, is that you perceive your identity as the wronged person. You consider yourself wronged. Therefore, to dissuade yourself from getting over it would take some doing, unless you saw yourself as the person who committed the wrong, or unless you moved on and re-identified yourself in some other situations. But the reason why it's hard for people to get over things more often than not is because they perceive that they are wrong. And within that perception, within that belief within themselves, is that need for validation that in fact actually they were wronged, and that yes, they would like it to be righted. Which is why it's this is why it's important that when someone says to you, get over it, only the person who's had the exact same experience as you, or at least partway similar experiences than you, can tell you to get over it. Only so, because they have been that wronged person, therefore they can identify with moving on. They are the best plausible to give you information and tools with which to aid your journey towards not feeling the way that you do anymore. Anyone else out of that severe has no right to tell you to get over it, because they're not the wronged contingent. I would no more tell Doreen Lawrence to get over the death of her son if I have never had a son who's died. I cannot possibly understand what it is to be a wronged person in that context. And so it jars my very living soul to hear people say move on, move on, move on. Again, just to reiterate, if it's certain love situations, by all means move on. Do you know what I mean? At the end of the day, I hate this expression, there's plenty more fish in the sea, because there really isn't. But actually, in reality, there are other men and women out there with which you can venture forth with. I understand in a relationship which breaks down, there's a mourning period and you need to address that, go through that malaise before you sail on into the great blue yonder, which is another relationship. But really and truly, it is the only context I can think of where saying at some point after a period of time, we're saying, I think it's time you moved on, is feasible. Outside of that, I cannot think of that. I had someone tell me recently, when I talked about the time I was falsely charged by the police 5 years ago, or where this wicked creature and racist onlooker, who it transpired ended up being an immigration solicitor. That's another story I'm going to touch on another time. Conspired with the police and had me set up for a false charge for assault, of which I hadn't done. And I was talking about it with someone, and actually largely when I talk about it, there is so much support, there's an understanding. I talk about what the police did, I talk about the fact that the witness statement said I didn't touch this racist solicitor on a train, and the police still charged me for it. And there is empathy, there is an understanding, and not gratuitous empathy, but a real ingrained understanding of where I'm coming from. However, I was talking about it with someone else, and this was my mistake actually, and I'm not going to tell you why I ended up talking about it with this person, but she is white, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, professional, lightning mind, all the rest of it. And I was talking about it with her, and she said to me, it's time that you moved on. But do you know what was funny about this advice that she said when she said move on? This woman who's never had the same experience herself, she then advised that I go and meditate and use yoga in order to release myself of chains from this situation. Can you imagine you've been set up on a false charge, and the woman's answer to this white woman's answer to it is yoga, meditation. I cannot think of an example as far removed as this woman. Nothing can define removed cognitive bias more than this woman's advice for me to take up meditation in order to appease the anger which was in me about this injustice that was committed against me 5 years ago. Nonetheless, as someone who wasn't wronged or wasn't wronged in this context, she will give out that advice. She will give out that misinformed, but I suppose vaguely good-natured advice, because she cannot possibly reconcile herself to being me and in that situation. She's never been in that context. She's never been in that situation. And it's just, it just blows my mind. I'm also blown by people who ordain to give that advice. Like I said, I would never think it upon myself to give anyone that advice to move on, because I know that in terms of psychopathy, I am not the wronged person. But it just blows my mind when I think about the many men and women who put themselves in a place to actually dole out that advice. Yes, I understand sometimes what you're receiving is so visceral and painful that what you do to dismantle the situation is come from a threadbare place and give the best advice that you can. I understand that, and actually you could argue the fact that they haven't had that experience means that's probably why that's the best advice that they can possibly give. That is a shining light, that is a defense somewhat. However, I never take it upon myself to tell anyone to move on or to get over it, because I do not identify it as the wrong person. And I cannot, unless the situation is truly horrific, put myself in a context where I think, well, if it were me, this is what I would do. You can never really do that. You know, there are people... So I'm just reminded there's a joke, and two black guys are stopped by a police, and I'm just going to edit this joke, but the policeman gets out, smacks the black guy across the face. Black guy's, what would you do that for? And then the police guy goes around to the other side of the car and slaps the black passenger on the face. And then the policeman, for some reason, says to the black passengers, I did it to both of you so that the other one can't say to you, if I were you, I would have. Do you know what I'm saying? And so it's, when I think about not being in, you know, when someone gives advice along the lines of you need to get over it, I can appreciate, actually, yes, there's a threadbare place with which you cannot reconcile yourself to the same context. I understand that perhaps this is what the best that you can come out with. But then to reason further that you probably wouldn't have done something in the same situation is even worse, because you really don't know what you'd have done in that situation. I think I've made a whole non-point there, and I don't have fancy editing equipment to actually edit it to make it look like that there was a coherent point right there. But yeah, that's my bugbear. People telling you to get over it. I no more want to get over it, or not no more want to get over it, but until I can readjust myself, change the identity that I've given myself, I can't possibly get over it, because it was a wrong that was done against me. And I wouldn't ask anyone else to ascribe to the same idea that they should get over it, because it's not a wrong that was perpetuated against me. And it would be advisable that people who have ever used the expression get over it or move on, could you try and think? Could you try and kind of step back and think to yourself, well, it wasn't me, it was them. Maybe I would have done something differently. Actually, no, scrap that. Don't even think maybe you would have done something differently, because you don't know what you would have done. Just be a shoulder to cry on. Just be a shoulder to cry on, be a shoulder to understand, be an intellectual discourse with which to banter to and from about the situation. Be those things, but please don't tell people to move on and get over it, because it's nigh impossible. Do you know, if you're not the wronged person, it is nigh impossible. And I would no more tell someone that was not similar to me or didn't have the same experience as me to do that. I wouldn't have done it. Anyway, this is one black rambling woman rant over. I'm out.